Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. The carousel has been so crazy this year that what's insane to me is that these huge jobs are opening up and we just forget about them. Arkansas opens up and it's like, we just don't talk about, like, when's the last time we talked about the UCLA job? And it happened with Penn State. Penn State opens 3 weeks ago. We're stunned that Penn State is willing to pay the buyout on James Franklin. Now, I know what the way it works. They're not going to have to pay nearly the $50 million, but he gets fired. We're shocked by it. We sort of move on, and then boom, Florida fires Billy Napier, and we forget about Penn State. Then LSU fires Brian Kelly, and we forget about Penn State. And so it's been a while since we did a Penn State update. But I'll tell you what, I think a quiet name is maybe emerging as the favorite. So as far as Penn State, where we last left off with Penn State, it was Matt Rhule. Penn State opens. Matt Rhule is the natural name. Matt Rhule played at Penn State. Matt Rhule worked for the current AD at Penn State. They have a great relationship. When the new AD came to Nebraska, he asked Pat Kraft, the Penn State AD, about Matt Rhule. And guess what the Penn State AD said? He said, do whatever Matt says and you'll have success. So that is the respect that they have for each other. And it'll be interesting. There are differing reports on Matt Rhule maybe getting an extension. I saw Will Compton, who's certainly plugged in that fan base, the former Nebraska player now in the media, say that is not the case. But what I'll also say is increasingly, listen, I was always a little dubious about Matt Rhule. I mean, he's got kids in middle school and high school, and I understand you met your wife at Penn State, and it's a great job, and it's this, and it's that. But you're going to uproot your family. Your wife has a business in town. Your parents just moved to Nebraska to be closer to you. Could you do it? Yes. Is it the kind of job where it's a no-brainer? I don't think it's a no-brainer, and especially as you're entering year 4 at Nebraska next year, where Dylan Raiola would, in theory, be going into his third year in your system. So I've never really bought that Matt Rhule will take the job. He's certainly a candidate as we record here at 11:34 a.m. Eastern time. But what I also think we have to do is acknowledge he might not take the job, and where does the candidate pool fall from here? And I bring it up because a very interesting name has started to emerge as maybe a favorite for the head coaching job at Penn State. Not somebody I would have anticipated, somebody that I actually rolled my eyes at as recently as like 3 days ago. I'm starting to get a little lukewarm on this one. Brian Hartline, the OC at Ohio State. So multiple reports have come out over the last couple of days. Matt, you can just kind of pop up the tweets as they happen. So one, apparently there's some sort of metric that is basically, I don't even know exactly what the deal is, but it says that currently he's actually deemed to be the favorite, according to the computers, to land the job. Oh, by the way, I saw a Penn State Ohio State page quote a Penn State message board saying, according to Joe Schmelter, Ohio State offensive coordinator / receiver coach Brian Hartline is a candidate for the Penn State head coaching job. So this has picked up buzz. And I'll tell you this. I heard about this over the weekend. Okay, so I'll tell you a quick side story. But I was getting off my Fox Sports radio shift, 2 a.m. Eastern time. I have a buddy who's pretty plugged in at Penn State, and we were texting throughout the show, just talking about college football. And I said, so what are you hearing about Penn State? And he said, I'm hearing a lot about Brian Hartline. And I'm like, really? You fired James Franklin, a guy with a 75% win percentage, to hire a first-year head coach who, let's not forget this about Brian Hartline because I think it's important. He was actually put in place 3 seasons ago now, so the 2023 season, to call plays. It did not go well. They had to basically demote him, hire Chip Kelly to be the OC last year, and now he's back at the OC spot. And so my first inclination was, that sounds crazy. That sounds terrible. I don't like it. But the more that I talk to my buddy, I can at least see it, and I could see the scenario why Penn State fans would actually be excited about it. Now, it runs counter to what we've heard. We've heard Pat Kraft, the AD, wants to hire a sitting head coach, a big name. He was going to, take the big swings on Marcus Freeman and on Matt Rhule and whatever. But let me explain to you how my buddy who's plugged in at Penn State explained it to me, because I do think it makes it a sort of interesting scenario. First of all, Brian Hartline, known as an elite recruiter. Okay. And listen, I know that James Franklin was a very good recruiter, but Brian Hartline is doing it at a different level. Now, maybe part of it is because he's got that block O on his chest. The scarlet and gray hits a little bit different across the country, but we can't deny what he has done as the lead recruiter and wide receiver coach at that school. Even if you just want to talk wide receivers, Marvin Harrison, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on of guys that he's brought in and that he's developed. I think and so by the way, I think the thought is he will at minimum have an elite roster, and it's just whether he can coach or not. I think the thing that I brought up to my buddy, and he didn't necessarily fully agree with me, but I think he sort of did, is I would think that in theory, you could maybe get him a little bit on the cheap and then really invest into an elite coaching staff, right? So if you think Jim Knowles is the long-term answer, you can say, hey, Jim Knowles, stay being the highest paid defensive coordinator, come work for me. You can hire a full-time play caller because Brian Hartline isn't a guy that should be demanding $10, $12 million a year like a Dan Lanning if he's going to leave, and he's not leaving, but you get the point. Like a Marcus Freeman who's not leaving, but if he left, you get the point. Like a Lane Kiffin, et cetera. You know, to me, I think that if you do want to go in the Brian Hartline direction, the conversation becomes, hey, dude, you got to take a little bit less because this is by far the best job you're going to get. Now, you can hope that another job opens up that's not as good as this and you'll get more base salary, but he makes $2 million a year. You give him 6.5, 7, you're tripling his salary. And then you say, hey, maybe you're a $10 million a year coach in a few years, but let's start you at 6, build up the coaching staff, build up NIL. And this is where my buddy brought up a couple interesting points. First of all, offensive mind. And I think at Penn State specifically, that matters. Why is that? Well, we've all watched Penn State's offense the last couple of years. It's pretty tough to watch. They have not been a good offense since Saquon Barkley, Joe Moorhead, and who was it? Trace McSorley were on campus. So it speaks to like the idea of like, oh, you're actually going to have a fun offense with fun players. Yeah, maybe it's something that you should consider. And certainly at Penn State, it hits a little bit different because the offense has been so bad. And finally, you know, I'll say this is, you know, I even mentioned this the other day on the Tuesday show, and who knows how truthful it is, but it is kind of worth at least acknowledging. I've been told behind the scenes that Brian Hartline is promising to bring players with him off that Ohio State roster. Now, how true is that? I don't think even Brian Hartline really knows. I mean, you know, listen, I can tell you this. In coaching hirings, whether it's head coaches or even assistants, I promise you, everybody's pitching I can bring somebody, right? In basketball, this is very famous. You know, a high school coach will be hired to bring an elite recruit. You know, sometimes you'll take an assistant off of another coaching staff and he'll bring 2 or 3 players with him from the previous place. Well, I've been told behind the scenes, Brian Hartline is promising to bring some of those players at Ohio State that frankly are not seeing the field right now, but good enough to play at Ohio State or anywhere in college football. But here's the other thing. Frankly, players that probably won't get on the field next year either as well. Because the thing about Ohio State, I don't think a lot of people realize, last year was the year they built towards. This year was supposed to be kind of that middle year before they had an elite team again next year. And most of their best players aren't even draft eligible this year. That's what made the Penn State thing such a colossal disaster. Drew Aller last year, Nick Singleton last year, Katron Allen last year, the wide receivers are all brought in. It's like this is a very finite window for Penn State. This was supposed to be the year that you caught Ohio State. Julian Sayin, first-year starter, redshirt freshman. Jeremiah Smith, only a true sophomore, not eligible for the NFL draft. And so I bring it up because, you know, I'm not going to say – listen, I don't know who Brian Hartline in theory is going to promise, but what I can tell you is this. There's some really good quarterbacks on that roster that are not going to get on the field next year. Julian Sayin is a redshirt freshman. He is not draft eligible. Well, you know who Ohio State has backing him up? 1, they got Lincoln Kineholz, who's been around forever. But 2, Tavian St. Clair, 5-star recruit in last year's class, top 5 prospect in the country. I don't know if Brian Hartline has personally promised him, but what I can tell you is this, is that if I was Brian Hartline, I think it's an interesting conversation to have, right? Hey, I might be able to bring Tavian St. Clair with me, and we can hit the ground running right away. Quincy Porter, one of the top wide receivers in the high school class last year, 3 catches so far this season. Well, guess what? It ain't going to get any easier to see the field next year when Jeremiah Smith is a true junior. Could Quincy Porter come with him? And so to me, I don't know if that should be the be-all, end-all sell. I do think it's kind of a pretty strong sell, though, right? Hey, we're going to bring all this 5-star talent that can't get on the field at Ohio State, and we're going to plug them into Penn State right away. The defensive infrastructure is already there. We're going to ramp up this offense, and it's going to be full speed ahead. So look, no one truly knows where the Penn State coaching search stands. I don't know that we get answers today or tomorrow or the next day. But I think the Brian Hartline stuff is real. And I'll take it a step further. It became much more interesting to me as I learned more about it. We'll see what Brian Hartline ends up doing, but this is fascinating. And I do think if Brian Hartline maybe takes a little bit less money to pump back into NIL and to pump into his coaching staff, and he can bring hypothetically Tavian St. Clair and maybe Quincy Porter, and maybe a couple other wide receivers, that all of a sudden makes him a very, very interesting candidate. And to be clear, I want to make one thing clear because I don't want to get yelled at. I don't want to get phone calls from people at Ohio State. I am not saying that Brian Hartline has promised any specific player, but I think he feels like there will be some players that would be interested in following me.